as a healthcare provider, I was telling people that PMS was normal until I turned 40. Okay. And I learned about this in my 40s. So I didn't know about it. The doctors don't know about it. It's not something we're taught. We are taught that, yes, PMS is just a normal part of life, not that, oh, things like dairy and gluten can increase your cramps. That's just not in the medical training, unfortunately, to the point where I now run workshops for, healthcare providers to bring awareness about cycle syncing and eating right and, not just eating right, eating cyclically, exercising cyclically, right? And I run workshops to teach the healthcare providers about that now.
What's up, ladies? Welcome to the health class She Deserves, the show where we ditch outdated women's health myths and talk real bodies, real cycles, and real stories. I am your host, Autumn Payon, and today we are speaking with cycle syncer Amy Dave. Amy Dave has been a physician's assistant for over 24 years. She is also a women's wellness coach specializing in helping moms navigate this crazy life by syncing their daily habits with their monthly cycles. A mom of 3 boys, Amy realized her passion while making changes to improve her own symptoms. Using lifestyle changes, Amy helps women overcome chronic fatigue, frustration, stress, and feelings of overwhelm, replacing them with increased energy, efficiency, and empowerment. Amy also helps women transition into menopause gracefully. She also hosts a podcast called This Incredible Mom Life, where she shares stories of the wild things our kids do. Amy, welcome to class.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you here. Let's start kind of at the beginning, I guess, because you've been a PA for decades, but more recently became a women's wellness coach. What fueled that transition?
One, as a PA, I always wanted to teach people that healthy habits like diet and exercise could prevent diseases. And the second thing was, more important probably, is when I went to actually heal my own symptoms, because I was having terrible PMS symptoms every month. I was miserable, cramping, bloating, irritability, fatigue, just stressed out, all these things. And I just wanted to get rid of that, like heavy bleeding. And so I went and I did some extra research. I learned about this thing called cycle syncing. And once I started implementing the techniques and my symptoms went away in just a few months, I was like, no, I need to teach this to other women. Everyone needs to hear about this. So I became a coach about 3 years ago, and that's what I do now.
Wow, that's awesome. And I love how you said, like you mentioned that you saw this big shift in just a few months, which is like, I'm sure some women listening are like, wow, like I wish. So was there something like specific that was kind of the lead like domino in that?
So with cycle syncing, right, you're tracking your monthly cycle and you go through 4 phases in each month. And you're supposed to get different vitamins and nutrients in each phase. You're supposed to do different exercises in each phase. I started with diet. I don't recommend starting everything at once because it's a little bit overwhelming, but I started just with changes to my diet and I started noticing improvement in a month. And then I added in the exercise and I saw more improvement, right? I changed my sleep habits and by 6 months I had like minimal symptoms. And if now I've been doing this like 5 years. So if I do get symptoms, I know like, oh, we had the wedding last month. I ate all this whatever fried food or this and that I wasn't supposed to eat. That's why I have cramps this month. Like now I know exactly what foods cause my symptoms, which foods I need to eat to counteract them and make them better. So yeah, it was mainly diet that I started with, but it's just, I've been adding on since then.
Was it a really drastic change for you, or were you already kind of like a very active person and already focused on anti-inflammatory eating habits? And so it kind of was like a smoother transition, or were you doing like a 180?
So I thought I was eating healthy. I was eating lots of salads and I thought I was doing all right with that. But it turns out my salads didn't have enough nutrients. So I was missing out on a lot of vitamins and minerals that, once I made some simple shifts and like, okay, instead of having lettuce, maybe we should have kale in our salad, right? Like we need to add some protein in there. We need to add some healthy fats in there. So it was like little shifts like that. And also with this cycle syncing, in certain weeks, like your ovulation week, you're supposed to eat raw fruits and vegetables and cold foods, right? So salads and smoothies are really great in that phase. Whereas when you're bleeding in your menstrual phase, your body doesn't want cold food. It wants warm foods. It wants soups and stews and roasted vegetables. So it was simple shifts like that. Like, am I having a salad this week or soup this week? Am I, eating raw vegetables or roasted vegetable? So it wasn't a 180, but it was definitely
Yeah.
more mindfulness and awareness of what I was eating. And I had to actually eat more to get the nutrients that I needed. So I started eating more and exercising less with the cycle syncing, and that's when I saw results.
And I think that's relatable for a lot of people because, I mean, we just sell this lie to women all the time that, first of all, they have to take up as little space as possible. And then, second of all, the way to do that is to like do all of this cardio and starve yourself. And it's like, well, first of all, that could
Mhm.
cause your body to hang on to weight because you're like super stressed. And second of all, that keeps you like really small and weak. And who's that benefiting? Not you. And I feel like unlearning those, that sort of societal conditioning can be really empowering. I'd love to ask about how, like, let's just unpack what exactly cycle syncing is, because I see some people misunderstanding it online, thinking that it's another diet to follow or that it's like restrictive. And it's like, actually, it's supposed to be the opposite. It's supposed to be liberating and
Mhm.
customizable to like your unique cycle and body.
Yeah. So the easiest way to explain it is like the 4 seasons, right? Just like Mother Earth goes through 4 seasons, we go through these 4 phases every month, and they align with the seasons. So I'll start with menstruation because it's the easiest one, right? That's your winter months. So you want to be dressing warm, eating warm foods, right? That's when the animals go into hibernation. So you don't want to be doing your cardio and your high intensity workouts. You want to rest, right? The following week is your follicular phase. That's like the spring phase. So new beginnings, your energy's coming back up. Your brain is actually very creative at this time for new projects. You want to eat lighter foods like steamed vegetables or quinoa and corn and lighter grains. So that's, spring. In ovulation is like your summer phase because we have the surge of testosterone and estrogen, right? So we have maximal energy at this time. We're feeling good. We want to be social. Our skin is glowing naturally at this time, right? That's when you're more fertile. So your body's just, that's when you want to pick your mate. That's when you want to uh, plan a presentation or an important meeting or an important conversation. That's your best week to do that. And then the last phase is the luteal phase, which is that PMS week. And that's kind of like the fall, right? So roasted vegetables, hearty meals, things like that. And if you're taking care of yourself with this cycle syncing and, exercises also play into this and all of that, you can see reduction to elimination of your PMS symptoms. And it's very intuitive because we actually are trained to ignore our bodies as women, right? We're trained to just take your pain medicine, use your heating pad, and push through the cramps and whatever else it is.
Let's dive in a little bit more to like specifics, I guess, of each of the seasons. So we have like, our winter, spring, summer, and fall. What are some more specific things? You've mentioned how we cook different foods and stuff and warmer foods later in the cycle, colder foods in the beginning. What else should we be focusing on beyond diet? And so when it comes to exercise or perhaps our social calendars, what other factors what other things can we factor in for cycle
Yep.
syncing?
So for exercise, your energy is rising, right, in those first 2 weeks. So you start off with cardio in the first week. During ovulation, you want to do your highest intensity workouts, whatever that is. So boot camp style workouts, high intensity interval training, endurance running. Like that's when you want to do your most, intense active workouts. The following week is your luteal phase. You want to do strength training. So you don't want to get your heart rate up too high, but you want to focus on more slow controlled movements. So strength training, Pilates, or like a power yoga kind of a thing. And then in that last week, again, you could rest, you could go for a walk, you could do some gentle yoga, which is also helpful to eliminate cramps and bloating and things. So that's your exercise. If you're working and you can plan your project managements out, the follicular phase is where you're more creative. So you want to think of new projects, new ideas. Ovulation phase, you want to connect and network and ask questions and have those conversations that you need to have. In this luteal phase, you might feel, I know like when women are pregnant, they feel that empty nesting syndrome where they just want to get everything done.
Mm.
So that's that progesterone in the luteal phase is that same feeling. So that's the week you want to check off like things on your to-do list and finish off a project and get things done. And then in your menstruation phase, you want to reflect on the past month. You want to do some introspection on how you were feeling, what went right, what went wrong in the last month, and then, prepare for the next month. So that's your cyclical living.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so interesting because, like, when I started really paying attention to my cycle and tracking it really well, it is like the luteal phase is I go into, like, such a, like, we just need to get things done mode of, like, tying up loose ends. I do most of my editing and stuff during the luteal phase, because I also am just so much less social. Like, I'm already a pretty introverted person, like, I like my own company, and, yeah, during the luteal phase is, like, definitely the time where I'm like, "No, talk to me, I'm just gonna, like, go down the list and check everything off." So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's very intuitive. Like you're doing that intuitively, right? So
Mhm.
once we learn to listen to our bodies and what they're needing, it's cycle syncing becomes easier.
Yeah, absolutely, and it becomes like you said, it's intuitive, it's just like a flow, and I think with if I always say that, like, if you are cycle syncing and it's stressing you out, you're probably not approaching it correctly, because it's really not supposed to be stressful. It's supposed to just be, like, this very loose guideline that you follow intuitively, and you can start with certain things, but, like, if someone says, "Oh, you're supposed to eat this vegetable at ovulation or whatever," and it makes you all bloated, don't eat it. Eat something else. You know what I mean? Like it's very individualistic, and I think there's like a beauty behind it. And I always think it's such a shame when I hear people like misunderstanding it, thinking it's restrictive.
I think it's just the awareness and the education factor of it,
Mhm.
because this is not something your doctors will tell you, right? If you go and you say, I'm having terrible heavy bleeding and cramps every month, they're going to say, well, we can put you on birth control, right? You can take pain medications or you can use your heating pad and just kind of push through.
Exactly.
So, yeah, unless you go to a functional health provider or a wellness person who's studied, like I have an advanced certificate in nutrition, right? So I did a lot of extra nutrition learning that I'd never learned in PA school.
Mhm.
So you need to find somebody like that to help you through it.
Yeah, and I always love interviewing people with that duality of like a more like conventional medicine side of things. They were either trained as a physician or physician assistant or nurse practitioner or whatever it is. And then they kind of like flipped and also got this extra functional training. I think that those people usually combine, they have such a more holistic approach to health and wellness that I think is much more useful for women in particular, because as we know, a lot of the conventional medicine is not made with women's best interest in mind, you know?
No, it's not actually. All the studies have been done on men. So with this holistic approach, I think the new term is it's a mix of science and woo woo is the new term
Yeah.
for the holistic approach.
Yes. Yeah. I know. I always like, at first I was always like, oh, but it's not woo because like so much of it is backed up by science. But then I realized I think people just like saying woo woo. I think that's just like a fun thing to say on the internet. But kind of in that, like on that note, a lot of us are told that PMS is normal. And when we go to the doctor, it's not treated as something that needs to be treated. It's just kind of like, oh, yeah, you're a woman. You kind of just have to deal with it. Or like you said, you can take X painkiller, you can take birth control. And not that those are bad things, they can definitely be useful for some people in certain situations, but it's more of the flippant attitude that we have towards it of like, yeah, it's PMS and it's normal. Like, what's your take on that? How's your approach different?
So as a healthcare provider, I was telling people that PMS was normal until I turned 40. Okay. And I learned about this in my 40s. So I didn't know about it. The doctors don't know about it. It's not something we're taught. We are taught that, yes, PMS is just a normal part of life, not that, oh, things like dairy and gluten can increase your cramps, right? Like that's just not in the medical training, unfortunately, to the point where I now run workshops for, healthcare providers to bring awareness about cycle syncing and eating right and, you know, not just eating right, eating cyclically, exercising cyclically, right? And I run workshops to teach the healthcare providers about that now.
And that's amazing because telling it directly to women is great, and having access to this information on the internet is great and everything. But the more healthcare providers that are well educated on this and really taking like a cyclical way of thinking with their female patients, it's a much wider like ripple effect, because they're meeting with however many people in a day, and they now have this more underlying like informed idea on how to address their problems with their female patients. Because just I can't tell you how many people are like on my TikTok that are like, well, PMS is normal. And I'm like, but it's common, but it's not normal. And
Exactly.
people tell me all the time that pain is normal. They're like, if you're on your period, you're supposed to be in pain. And I'm like, no, you're not. Think about what you're
Yeah.
saying for a second. And people will really argue with me. And I'm like, it's my page. Go make your own videos, I
Yeah.
guess. But it drives me
Yeah.
insane, and it makes me sad.
But it's just what we were taught, right? Like,
Yeah,
again, I learned this in my 40s. If I knew this in my 20s and my 30s, like that would that's 2 decades of my life that would have been so much different because I feel
mhm,
like a different person now than I did 5 years ago before I learned about all this. And it
exactly.
unfortunately, we've just been conditioned to believe that it's normal.
Yeah, exactly. What are the warning signs for somebody who's maybe like, okay, I've been cycle syncing, or like I'm going to start cycle syncing, they do all this stuff and they probably are going to see some improvements, but like what are the warning signs for somebody that they don't just have imbalanced hormones, they might have an underlying condition that needs to be addressed? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So the first thing I tell people is just track your cycle and track your symptoms because if you're not having regular cycles, like bleeding once a month, it could be things like PCOS, right? So, I mean, get the medical workup, get the ultrasound, get the blood work, but most times the doctors will say, everything looks normal, right? So, yes, definitely get the medical workup first because if there is anything, you may have a lot of cysts on the ovaries or you may have a blockage in the uterus or something. But if your medical workup is normal and your doctor says your blood work and your ultrasound, everything is fine, then what hurt is it going to be to try a little bit of diet and lifestyle changes, right? Like, try it for 3 months. If it doesn't improve, then move on. It's an experimental process, right? So it's not textbook, cookie cutter, follow this in this order and you'll get it. It's like, no, let's cut out dairy and see how you feel. Let's
Mhm.
cut out gluten and see if that makes a difference, right? Maybe you feel less bloated or less crampy. Or for me, if your estrogen is off, right? I was bleeding several days, like 5 days heavy. And now it's like 2 days, right? Because I learned, okay, your liver metabolizes the estrogen and your liver needs raw fruits and vegetables. It needs cruciferous vegetables, which are like broccoli, kale, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower. Like it needs more nutrients from those kind of vegetables when you're ovulating, right? So it's just things like this. And you don't have to follow it to a T. Like if you're following it 75% of the time, and then that other 25% of the time you're out, you're going to be at a party, you're going to be on vacation, there's a holiday coming up, whatever that is, go ahead, enjoy life, have the dessert, have the, right? You may just have to say, you know what? In my luteal phase, my body actually wants dark chocolate. So maybe I'll have a dark chocolate dessert instead of something else, right? Or maybe I'll have fruit for dessert, like something with fruit in it. So yeah, it's trial and error, it's experimentation, and it's an ongoing, evolving process.
I love that approach of just kind of experimenting with yourself and seeing what works for you. Because again, there's not really like a one size fits all approach, and it can be really different for everybody. And I know for me personally, when I started, God, it was like 6 years ago, probably now, that I started like learning about cycle syncing and taking it more seriously. And it was like a little bit rocky in the beginning. Like I wasn't approaching it correctly and it was stressing me out. And then I kind of realized, I have to lean more into the intuition behind it. And as I started doing that, I noticed like I did have a lot of improvements with a lot of different things, like my bloating, and I wouldn't get headaches as often. And like mood swings were a little more stable. Like there definitely were solid improvements, but there were also certain things like my pain and certain like inflammatory responses that were getting worse despite me doing all this. And that was kind of my clue of like, okay, I think that, this could potentially be endometriosis. And that's when I really pushed for a specialist and got the surgery and got diagnosed. And so without that kind of evidence of I'm doing everything I possibly can and X, Y, and Z is improving, but this is getting worse, like that was really a big clue for me in my journey with endometriosis of actually getting diagnosed. I think without that, I wouldn't have known, or I wouldn't have been like as confident, I guess. I would have been like, no, but there's still something else I can do to like control this. Sometimes things are out of your
Yeah.
control? Yeah.
Yeah. But like I said, get the workout
Yeah.
and do the lifestyle changes, right? They both
Yeah.
go hand in hand.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. What advice do you have for women who are like, I have such an irregular cycle. I have no idea what phase I'm in at any given moment?
So there's two things you can do. And this goes to the women on birth control too. You can follow the moon cycles. So the full moon is ovulation and your new moon is menstruation. So you can practice cyclical living like that. And if you just have like PCOS and your cycles are irregular and you start practicing with the moon, if your hormones regulate, your cycles can also regulate. So that is one way to do it. The other option is just take it like you're in the luteal phase until your next period comes back, because that's when you're kind of taking more care of yourself, right? You're eating really nutrient dense foods. You're not doing too much strenuous exercise. So that's the second option, is just from one bleed, if you're not sure when your next bleed is coming, just stay in that luteal phase protocol until your bleed comes, and then you can start cycling. But again, as you start making some changes, your cycles will automatically regulate if it's just a hormonal issue.
Definitely. I used to do, I don't know if you've ever done this, but I used to do moon salutations, like a yoga flow. And I like loved doing those. And now like we're talking about it, I'm like, I should start doing them again. Cause and for anybody listening, like I'm sure you could just find it. If you just Google it, you could just find like a flow online on YouTube or something. But yeah, have you done those?
I've done the sun salutations and like
Mm.
those, yeah, like the opposite. But
And
yeah,
then
the moon has a monthly cycle. And, if you don't have your own monthly cycle, it's a really great substitute. I even offer it to my postmenopausal ladies who come to me for like, issues of weight loss and hot flashes and this and that. I'm like, okay, well, you can always sync to the moon
yeah,
and still live the cyclical kind of feminine life, right?
yes. And I also have heard because obviously now, like, age of the internet, we're talking a lot more about women's health than we have been in previous generations. And I hear stories from some women who are reaching menopause or they're postmenopausal and they're like, kind of have this grief around like, I went my entire life not knowing this stuff and not like honoring my cycle because nobody ever taught me, and they feel this kind of grief around it. And I've heard that, really focusing on the moon and living cyclically accordance with the moon is really helpful for that kind of mental side of things as well. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Women, we are biologically meant to live in a cyclical way. And our modern day society and culture trains us to ignore that.
Yeah. Yes. And it's built around, because it's like built by men for men. It's when you think about like a typical office work day, it's very structured to the rise and fall of testosterone as
Yeah,
opposed to like a
exactly.
monthly. Yeah. Yeah. What I feel like when you start looking at the world through that lens, you start to see everything that is just like linear as opposed to cyclical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything in nature is cyclical, right?
Hmm.
Like plants, they have the seedling growth and then whatever the harvest, and then they rest, right? The
Yeah.
trees lose their leaves, the plants, you don't get flowers in the, fall and the winter, right? Like everything in nature has a cycle, and we have a cycle too, and we just have to follow it.
Yeah. And I love how you mentioned rest too. I don't Let me know if this like resonates with you. But for me, when I started really paying attention and cycle thinking, it was like I was finally giving myself permission to rest after like years of being told I just had to like go.
Yeah. And especially like once you become a mom, one, I know for a fact that moms are not taking care of themselves because we're running around behind the kids and the activities and the PTA stuff and the soccer stuff and like everything else, right? And two, if you have pregnancies close together, like my 3 kids are 4 years apart. So I had I was like pregnancy, nursing, pregnant, nursing, pregnant, nursing, like back to back to back. I was so nutrient depleted, right? That once I started eating better and just getting the vitamins and minerals that my body needed, I felt so much better just like refilling the tank, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So those two issues can definitely come across, especially with moms, but even for the non-moms, if you're corporate and you're climbing the ladder and you're, getting all these promotions and working harder and this and that, you're still not taking care of yourself. Right. So, yeah, definitely take care of yourself. Learn to rest because we are all overbooked and we are all just running from one place to the other. And that's contributing to the stress, to the
Yeah.
hormone imbalances, everything
Yeah.
else.
Absolutely. And I like how you bring up the mom thing because I was going to bring it to motherhood next because I know that your audience is primarily moms. What advice do you have for moms who are like just already at their max and don't have time to think about this or they feel as if like cycle syncing isn't going to fit in with their kids' lives?
So I was that mom. I was running on empty for a long time and I felt it, but it doesn't take a whole life overhaul, right? Like you can start with 15 minutes a day to move your body or to practice meditation and relieve stress or, color. Coloring is such a great stress reliever, anxiety reliever. You could prep some vegetables for a meal, right? Like 15 minutes of intentional time is a great place to start. And the only other thing I tell moms is just start tracking your cycle. You don't even have to change anything. Just start tracking your cycle and keeping track of your symptoms, and you will start to see patterns. Um, just without changing anything at all. And as a mom, you think, "Oh, I don't have time to cook healthy and this that," but your kids need to eat healthy too. I hate to tell you
Mhm.
this, but so now I have learned that you can puree things like cauliflower and zucchini and stick it into the marinara sauce that the kids are going to be eating. That, I'm also eating that pasta dish now because, hey, it's got my vegetables and I added some nutritional yeast and I added some hemp seeds into the sauce. So my whole family's kind of eating that one pot meal that,
Yes.
because they need to eat healthy too. So it can be done. It might take a little bit of learning and a little bit of just getting used to taking care of yourself. Like I had to set a timer initially when I started meditation for 5 minutes and I couldn't even make it to 5 minutes because I was so like wired and like, okay, what's next? What's next? And I'd look at the timer and be like 2 minutes. I'm like, what? And then
Yeah.
eventually, right, I did it for several weeks and then I hit 5 minutes. I increased it to 7 minutes. And then again, by the 4 minute mark, I'm like, am I done yet?
Yep.
It takes
Yep.
time, but you can start with as little as 5 minutes a day or 15 if it's going to be like, prepping vegetables or something. It doesn't take a lot.
Mhm.
And your kids will see you. If they see you exercising and eating better, they're going to learn that too for their own lives. And you're modeling the healthy behavior. So you have to do it.
Yeah. And especially if you have girls too, like young girls, if they're already kind of like, whether or not they know it, if they're already on your routine and you're making meals that are already like kind of syncing with your own cycle, by the time they go through puberty and they start cycling, it's like such an easy transition for them. And again, whether or not it's something that you explicitly say out loud, it's something that they're intuitively going to be much more connected with than the average young girl.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Because the mom, I like to say, she sets the thermostat for the house, the
Uh,
emotional thermostat. So if I'm stressed out and anxious and rushed and exhausted, my kids are going to see that and feel that. Right.
yeah.
And they're going to feel more stressed out and overwhelmed. Where if I'm calm and happy and more present with them, they see that also. Right. And so, like, I have 3 boys, so they're not going through these cyclical changes, but they notice that change in me.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a story real quick. I used to, I guess, yell a lot because once I started cycle syncing, one of my boys was like, "Mom, you don't yell at us as often as you used to." Right. And I was like, I love that.
Yeah. You're like, I'm more regulated now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true because there's such a huge nervous system component to it as well, and everything's so connected that like start with whatever seems easiest to you. Quite honestly, if diet is the easiest thing, then go for it. Exercise the easiest, go for it. If like the more like a mental thing or meditation, like you're saying, is easier for you, start with that. Whatever's going to be the easiest to sustain. because it's all going to affect each other in the end anyway.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah,
And
that's
once
awesome.
one thing fixes, then you can work on the next and the next
Mhm.
and the next. Like,
Yeah.
don't try to do it all at once because
Yes.
that's when people get overwhelmed. That's when it feels too confusing, too hard. Just
Yeah.
pick one thing.
Right. One step at a time. Yeah, and I'd love to talk about because you use the phoenix metaphor, like, on your website and stuff, and I'd love to know how that, like, perspective of rising from the ashes has really helped you along this journey.
So for me personally, I'm a two-time cancer survivor, and I went through infertility treatments, which is where my Phoenix story came through. I don't remember exactly when, but every time I went to the hospital or had a procedure or had a blood test, I would tell my husband, "Oh, it's like my burning day, and I'm going to come out of this stronger." But if you look at cyclical living, right, that is the cycle of the Phoenix: birth, growth, right, peak performance, death, and then you're reborn again. And so it's all connected. And I love using that as my life mantra now.
Yeah, that's really amazing. It's such, like, a great perspective because, yeah, I mean, it fits so perfectly into cyclical living. This is my burn day. That's, like, it's it makes it
Everybody
less.
goes through seasons, right? Like
Yeah,
whether you're
yeah.
going through a breakup or a new job or you're moving or you're having a kid, that's your season in life, right? And then you will change, you will grow out of it. Yeah, everything is seasonal and cyclical.
Yeah, and it reminds you that it's not permanent. So if it's a particularly, like, tough time, it's like this isn't gonna last forever. And then if it's a particularly good time, you're also like, I really gotta appreciate this in the moment. I think it's a great outlook on life. But we are coming around to the end here. I have one last question that I like to ask all of my guests at the end of our interviews. If you could rewrite the health class curriculum that every woman deserves, what would your first lesson be?
Oh my gosh. I think I would teach this cycle syncing in like our health class in middle school that we had,
Okay.
way long ago, that it's normal to go through seasons and cycles and that your pain and your suffering is not normal. I think those are the two things I would teach people is yes, there is a cycle and no, your pain and your cramps and your heavy bleeding is not normal.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that would change the trajectory of so many women's lives. And just that simple message at a young age could change everything. So, yeah, that's incredible. Thank you so much, Amy. This was such an awesome interview. I can't wait for everyone to hear it. I know that everyone's going to learn a lot from this. So, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It was great.
Of course. And for everybody listening, I will link Amy's podcast and website in the show notes. And you can find all of my information in the show notes as well. As always, feel free to reach out if you have any feedback or questions or anything. Thanks for listening and class dismissed.